to another Salt Air. We are so excited that you are here watching us. I'm Janae Andrus, the Salt Community Manager and your host for the hour. And I'm not here alone. I'm here with Tom Hatch, creator of Salt. What's up, Tom?
Fortunately, this will not take an hour.
Oh, did I say hour? Crap. Should we start over?
Janae, you're supposed to roll with the joke. Do we need to have acting 101 lessons? You roll with the joke.
Fine, I can roll with it. I was going to keep you here for an hour, but, whatever. So let's get into the philosophy of salt. And again, that might take an hour, but we don't have an hour. So the philosophy of salt, Tom. We get granular on salt here at Salt Air. And if you don't want to miss that, by the way, please subscribe at the button below. But today we're getting granular on the philosophy of salt, which I think if I'm just going to jump ahead here to sum up, it's to be not weak, like we talked about in another episode, and yet accessible, easy but powerful. Is that about right?
Yeah, very much so. So when we come back and we look at one of those really core guiding principles of the SALT project is that we wanted to make it as easy to use as possible without sacrificing power and scale. And this is a problem that we run into a lot. There are a lot of other tools out there that are very, very easy, but they have very real problems when it comes to scale. And a lot of those are SSH tools, in particular, that are used for configuration management, because and frankly, a lot of proprietary tools that are made to be, hey, it's easy out of the box, but it doesn't grow with you and grow with your infrastructure. And I'm continually amazed looking at very dominant tools, again, that are open source and proprietary tools that have been around for a very long time. And they come back and say that it takes hours and sometimes even days to process at scale. And we look at the infrastructure required to deploy these tools at scale. And they're just not built for scale, right? They're built just for day one. They're built just for the initial go. And the scenario that we run into there is that since they're built just for day one, and since they're built just for that initial go, you end up with longer term problems. Instead of being able to reap the benefits that you can have from having a piece of software that is at scale. Because when we boil it down, it is very important that software is easy to use and that it makes your life easier. But you want to choose software, and we've tried really hard to build software that is easy on day one, but is also easy on year two. And so a lot of the highlights that we have inside of Salt that make this possible are the fact that you can install a Salt minion and run code and execute config management directly on a machine without issue right out of the box. You can install Salt SSH and very easily use SSH routines to command and control large numbers of systems. But that code is going to scale up to Salt's high-speed systems. And this is why we come back. One of our favorite bake-offs was between Salt and a very dominant SSH tool. And this company came back and said that one of the big things that changed their mind about using Salt was that they had 15,000 servers that were being managed. And with the one tool, to change a password across 15,000 servers, it took a little under 3 hours. And with Salt, it took a little under 30 seconds. And that's a dramatic difference when we're looking at large-scale software deployment and software management, because we've got to be in a position where we've still got to be able to deal with very large-scale software problems. We can't just back down and say ease is more important than performance. And similarly, with that same group, they came back and said that Salt was able to manage those 15,000 systems with a full UI and full functionality with 2 management servers. Whereas the other tool that was built to be easy on day one had to have, for those 15,000 servers of management, it had to have somewhere in the realm of 15 management servers. And even with all of that bandwidth, it still took them, again, just short of 3 hours to just change a password across.
Which is ridiculous and unacceptable.
Oh, yeah, completely ridiculous and unacceptable.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting when you say that ease of use can't, be a reason to sacrifice power, because you say that, but at the same time, we do still prioritize ease of use, just not overpower, but it doesn't diminish, right, from the ease of use of Salt, I don't think.
Very much so. What this does is it introduces extremely difficult engineering problems that we have to tackle on a regular basis. Because we've got to be able to create systems that are significantly more flexible. We've got to be able to create systems that are able to deal with, again, just a broader set of cases. We're not just saying, here's an easy to use config management language. We're here saying, here is an ironclad config management language that is also very easy to use. And we're not just saying, we want to make a config management language that's easy to learn. It needs to be one that's easy to learn and easy to maintain and easy to grow and easy to build on for a long time. And those are big things.
I like that a lot because, again, you're not just saying it's easy to use and it's powerful to do what it's doing, but also there's so much to build on, because the thing that always amazes me about Salt over and over again is how widespread its use is, just the plethora of things you can do with it. And so you can build on that for a long time. And it seems very scalable from the conversations I have with our users. It's just so scalable in the different things that people do. And people who have been using Salt for years are still finding new things to do. And it definitely keeps them interested and involved. And it's not because, this is so complicated, I'm still learning it. It's, this is so dynamic, I'm still finding more applications for it, which is, I think, a very different thing.
Right. And because scale doesn't just have to do with dealing with lots of systems and dealing with complex environments. We have to scale for people, right? Because scale isn't about just learning something quickly. Scale is about functioning inside of large teams. Scale is about being useful to someone even after they've been using it for years and years. Scale is being able to continually find more uses and applications for the software, instead of saying, I'm using the software because it makes it easy to set some stuff up.
Oh, that's well put. And what was it in particular that made you feel like this was, obviously, this is the best approach and best solution and best philosophy to have, but what triggered these things in you? Like, did you have certain experiences or frustrations that made you go, this has to be better?
Oh, yeah. It's a very classic problem, especially in open source software. Open source software is generally built to solve one specific problem. And a lot of open source software doesn't scale. And it doesn't scale because those are hard problems to solve. But not only are they hard problems to solve, it doesn't scale because of some of the components of the philosophy of open source software. Open source software scales because it's good at gluing lots of pieces together. When we don't look at software through the lens of gluing things together and we're trying to make a slightly larger application, a lot of people who write open source software become too myopic because they're very used to thinking about things through that lens of the old school Unix philosophy of make one thing and make it do it well, instead of understanding that we're just dealing with a broader applicable scope. The other reason why I wanted to make it scalable was because the primary use of Salt on day one wasn't configuration management. It was high-speed parallel remote execution, which means that the core use case that I had mandated scalability. And so since that core use case mandated scalability, that's one of the things that made it that made it as powerful as it is today.
Well, that's so interesting because most people, when they think about SALT 101, think of, I think, config management. And so I think not a lot of people are aware that it actually was originally created for that and not for config management.
Well, that use case is one of the dominant use cases that we have, is because people come in and they want to use it for high-speed remote execution and parallel remote execution, because you've got to be able to do stuff across lots of systems in your infrastructure. And it's much better to ask your infrastructure a question than it is to look at outdated information about an infrastructure in a database. And so what you end up with is being able to come back and say, look, we've got a really good view of what's going on inside of this infrastructure because we can just ask. We don't have to run long-standing queries.
I think that's fantastic. Do you feel that there are other solutions out there that maybe try to have a similar philosophy but just come up short? Or are there any that maybe are better?
I think that this philosophy is something that a lot of really successful open source projects evolve into. So I would say that the Linux kernel originally wasn't built for the level of scale that it is able to deal with today. And it wasn't built with the level of flexibility that it can deal with today. And I would say that that's similar to, say, desktop environments. So if we look at KDE and GNOME, their platforms are significantly more flexible and pliable and pluggable than they were 10, 15 years ago. And so I feel like this is something that open source evolves into. But it's also something that is challenging when you think about architecturally and when you begin working on software, to be able to say, how do I feed these two mouths? And how do I satiate these two monsters?
That absolutely makes sense. And I just decided to switch up angles just for fun. And also because my camera decided to go on the fritz. So good thing I have two cameras.
It happens.
It does happen.
Yeah, I'd much rather plow through problems. But then
right?
let the problems beat me.
It's just not a salted webcam. That's the problem. No, it's awesome. I love chatting about SALT philosophy because at the end of the day, we always land on it is not weak and it is accessible and it is easy. And I love that about SALT. So, and for people who are trying to learn more about it, of course, we are here. So watch more Saltair episodes. And as always, find us at saltproject.io, which is your source of truth for all things SALT. Thanks for being with us today. We'll catch you next time.